We are on the cusp of a major social change. Do you feel it? Even if you don't, make no mistake, change is coming, and it is going to be unforgettable. I'm your host, Dr. Sarah Hart, and here on Prime Spark, where we work with and on behalf of women over 55, I want to help you find that spark that will ignite your way forward, reflect your gifts to the world, and illuminate your path through this next stage of life. Through these podcast conversations, I hope to inspire you to see how you can make a significant contribution to some of the gnarly problems that are facing us right now. Join me, and together let's discover our Prime Spark. Hi, and welcome to Prime Spark. I'm Sarah Hart, and I'm so happy you're here with us. Prime Spark is designed for women over 55, or close, with a goal to help us all live our happiest, most fulfilling, productive lives now and in the future. The mission of Prime Spark is to change the way our society sees and treats older women. That's a big mission, which only means we all need to be involved, and we need to get going now. And today I have the pleasure of talking with Iona MacKenzie, a woman whose work I greatly admire. In her youth, Iona MacKenzie, a poet and novelist who also writes nonfiction, frolicked on a Canadian farm in an area almost too small to be on the map. She didn't practice writing then, but she did learn to pay attention to her surroundings. The clouds in the sky offered images that stirred her imagination and stimulated her dreaming self. Calves, cows, sheep, pigs, chickens, turkeys, dogs, cats, and horses were her early teachers and her main playmates. Those years instilled in her the need to honor those in her care and the realization that being successful involves hard work. As a writer, it includes her dedication to the writing craft and her belief that commitment and perseverance form the machinery that writers depend upon. Welcome, Lily. I'm so glad you're here with us today.
Hi, Sarah. I'm happy to be here also. Thanks for that introduction.
Oh, you're welcome. It's I'm curious about so many things in it. But in getting started, let me just ask you, do you experience getting older? And if you do, what is that experience? And if you don't, why is it you think you don't?
Well, I don't experience it in the sense that I still have the energy and curiosity and desire to experience new things that I've always had. And so I have to remind myself, okay, Lily, you're 82. And things are changing. And I guess the thing about being 82 is that there really is, from even when I was 70, I could put off the thought, well, you're going to die. But now it's closer to that time, and you don't know, of course, when that's going to happen. So that's a reminder, unfortunately, for those of us who are in our 80s, that there is a limited time for us. So I think I feel even more pressure to do as much as I can in the time I have remaining. And then to forget that I'm 82 for a while.
Good idea. Both ways, good idea. Yeah, isn't that interesting that the older we get, the more we're aware of not knowing when could be the end. And that's actually true our whole lives.
That's right.
But we don't really take that in until we get closer to the end of our lives, which is probably, I don't know, maybe a good thing, maybe not a good thing, but it is the way I think most of us operate.
Yes, I think so. And
So
rightly so.
go ahead. I'm sorry.
Oh, excuse, and rightly so.
And rightly so. Yes, I think that's right. So I'm fascinated with the number of things you've written, and I believe you started your first poetry collection in 2011. I think it came out then. Is that right?
That's when it came out. But it doesn't mean that's when I first wrote it. So, I mean, my publishing career started late. I was in 2011, I was 71. And my first novel came out when I was 75. I was called a debut author. It's, at 75. I always laugh at that. Uh, yeah, so the publishing part came late.
How did that happen? What was, I mean, you must have been writing for a long time. And then at some point, did you decide, okay, now it's time to publish, or what happened?
Well, it actually, I kept voluminous journals from the time I was, I'd say about 27 until now. And I've been reviewing those early journals. At the moment, I'm in 1981. And in 1981, I was 41. And I was struggling then still to believe that I was a writer. It was a long journey to be able to say, I really am a writer. And I have some things to offer the world. So it wasn't really until my 40s that I made much of an effort to publish anything. So I published tons of, short pieces in journals and magazines and so on, both in Canada, where I grew up, and in the US. But publishing books, I didn't even think that I would ever write a book, much less publish one at that age. So, I had started working. I decided that since poetry didn't make any money, if I published a book of poetry, that I'd better start thinking about writing a novel if I wanted to make any money as a writer. And even that's kind of a joke because writers don't make much money. So at some point I began writing a novel that evolved eventually into what became my first published novel, Fling. But in terms of why didn't I promote publishment before then? Well, I did. I went through the traditional route of looking for the New York agent who's going to, connect me with the big publishing houses and make me lots of money. And I had some success. I had it wasn't a New York agent, but a woman who lived in LA, and she tried to publish my another novel of mine that came out not long after a Fling did, Free Fall, a divine comedy. But she didn't have the connections, or wasn't able to sell it. Oddly, my big New York agent ended up being someone that I had submitted another novel, Curva Pelagrosa, to, and he loved it, and he thought there was going to be a bidding war about it. Unfortunately, it was 2009, and if you recall, there was a real financial downturn then. And so to get a big house to show interest in, a first-time novelist was just, tried for a year and had to finally say, it wasn't going to happen. We got some nice responses to it, but no one was willing to take the risk. So that caused me to go back and with that particular novel, to review it, to do a lot of revision. And then after, having tried the traditional route and not being successful, and I queried hundreds of agents, during that time, and I decided I'm going to just go directly to small publishers, and so I was successful soon after, and Canal Publishing picked up Flame, and then later they offered me a contract on two other books that they published in mine, Free Fall and The Ripening, the last novel that came out about a year or so ago.
Let's go backwards to Fling. What is Fling about?
Well, Fling is, it's about a mother and daughter. The mother is 90 and the daughter is 57 in the narrative. And the mother was from Scotland originally, and her own mother had gone to Mexico City back in the 1920s and never returned. And so she has gotten a letter from the dead letter office in Mexico City saying that her mother's ashes have turned up, and they can't send them through the mail because of health problems. and so she'll have to come to Mexico to get them. So that sets off the daughter, Heather, is a visual artist, and she lives in California. The mother lives in Canada, in Calgary, and the mother talks the daughter into taking her to Mexico City to get these ashes. And so it's a very zany, funny book on so many levels. But it's also serious because death definitely enters into it, and also the relationship between mother and daughter. They, have some exchanges that are really important in terms of their relationship and some of the problems that the daughter especially has had with the mother. So it's a book about mothers and daughters, but it's also about the imagination and how essential it is. I think that comes through in all of my books. Yeah, they have a flame. They both have flames.
Well, it sounds fun. It sounds like, you said earlier that way before, I think I understood this right, that really before you published very much of anything, maybe a little bit, but you had to convince yourself that you were a writer, or you had to realize you were a writer. And how do we convince ourselves we're a writer if we haven't published something that was at least modestly successful?
Well, I don't think you have to publish you're a writer and to acknowledge that you're a writer. And in fact, one of the things that I never worried about publishing was poetry, because it's so essential. I had a dream once that poetry was the foundation really of all my writing. And so it's so essential to me and so satisfying to me to write poetry, or to write anything for that matter, that I don't really need to publish. The publishing is, of course, to get that external recognition and maybe to make some money. But I don't think that you have to publish to think of yourself as a writer at all.
Can you describe or explain what you mean by that poetry is foundation to you and to your writing?
Well, it comes from a very deep place in me. I realize that whenever I read the poems that I've written, that it's showing me a part of my psyche that I otherwise wouldn't have been aware of. And it's much more closely related to, what I guess we would call soul, spirit, something. And so I think for me at least, in when I'm writing prose as well, I think that that level comes through because of the poetry uh, that I've written, and in how I approach, imagery and so on in my narratives.
So you can, is this right? That you can go to the depths that you go to in your novels because of the depth you have with poetry.
Yes, but I wouldn't say, well, this has to be true for everyone. It's just my truth.
Right, right,
Yeah,
yeah.
right. So you
Yeah.
don't have to be a poet to write novels at all,
Right,
or anything else. But it just happens to be what's true for me.
for you.
Yeah.
And it seemed to me from that wonderful story of your growing up that that that's a very poetic way to grow up.
Yes. I was so I had the good fortune of spending those early years on a farm, and the reality of farm life is it's hard work, and the reality of writing, if you're trying to be successful at it, it's hard work too, and requires tremendous commitment. And the same thing, on a farm. You have to be as committed to the animal. You have to be committed to the animals because you're dependent on them, and they're dependent on you. So, that's so much a part of my being, because of those early years of feeding the chickens and gathering the eggs and milking the cows, and all of the many, many, many chores that you have when you're living on a farm.
I think sometimes many of us don't really understand how what hard work being a successful, in whatever way you want to say that, successful writer is. I mean, it's not so amazing anymore to me, but it was when I first heard about this, that really successful writers are at their desk at 4 or 5 in the morning every day.
Not me.
Not me. I'm not a no. But
I'm not an early morning riser at all.
But it's a discipline that you sit down and you write.
It is.
Do you feel like it? No. You still sit down and you write. You write something.
You do. And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because when I was 50, I married my current husband, and he had gone through a divorce, and he had 2 children. One was 5 and one was 10. So at 50, I had taken on the additional responsibility. My own son had already grown to adulthood, but then I had that responsibility. So I was teaching part-time as well. And so, what happens to my writing life? Well, I couldn't give that up. So I made the commitment to myself that I would write for a minimum of an hour every day. And I managed to do that. And by doing that, I mean, if you write an hour a day, you can produce a draft of a novel in a year. And you can write lots of short things too during that time. So it doesn't have to be, hours every day. You can just write for an hour a day, and you can do a tremendous amount.
Right. I think it I don't know this, but it seems to me when I hear writers talk about it that it's actually more about consistency than length of time sitting at the desk.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. So your latest poetry collection, California Dreaming,
yes,
just came out.
It did. Yeah.
Tell me about California Dreaming. I live in California, so I'm interested in California Dreaming.
Yeah, I live in California too. And I'm not sure how I came to that. Well, I do. It's the title of a poem. And the poem focuses on some unusual images that come out of living in California. And I think California has a kind of, even though it's it produces so much in terms of fruit and vegetables and other things, and it certainly has a really good economy. But there's also, I think, that dreamer level, and we see some of that coming out of the Hollywood part of California, movies and how they try to reproduce, I think, our unconscious life in certain ways. And so I feel as if, in the collection, I think the poems are grasping some aspect of California and the dreaming quality of it, which doesn't mean that it's not substantial, but that it just adds another dimension to what it's like to live in this state, this wonderful state.
That's interesting. I don't think of dreams as being insubstantial. So
yeah, well, some people do,
yeah.
Fantasies, this kind of thing, what, you're just dreaming, that kind of thing.
Yeah. So I think the latest thing that you've written that will come out soon is Dreaming Myself into Old Age, One Woman's Search for Meaning. So tell me about that. That is fascinating to me.
Well, one of the things that I have paid a lot of attention to since I was a young woman are my nightly dreams. And so every morning I, try and capture them in my journals. And this has just been a discipline that I've followed, since I was 27. And I've also been in Jungian analysis too, as a younger woman. And then when I turned 72, I thought, well, I think it's time to go into analysis again. I had my fears about aging, about dying. It seemed like a good time to, address those things. And so I started working with a wonderful Jungian analyst. And so the book came out of really those years of working with him. And so in the narrative, I include some of the dreams that I brought to him during that time, and include the reflections on them, how they spoke to me, and then I also the book also, I call it a hybrid memoir because it isn't just my personal memories and experiences, but it also includes some poetry. It includes how the arts are part of that dreaming life for me, and how essential they are, all of the arts, to my well-being, to my understanding of myself and the world. So, so I suppose it boils down to a real push for our imaginative life, and how essential it is for us not to lose that connection as we age. That our bodies may fail us, but our imaginations never will, as long as we exercise that part of ourselves. And the same, they don't have to be actual dreams that we're focusing on, to have some sort of spiritual life or interest in things, beyond us. But as long as we're using our imagination and giving ourselves access to parts of the world that trigger the imagination, then I think we still have a vital life.
Love that. We all know how. We may do it or we may not do it, but we all know how to exercise our bodies.
Yeah.
How do we exercise our imaginations in order to keep them as supple as we're trying to keep our bodies?
Yeah, great question, Sarah. And I think I've sort of answered it a bit. I think for me, the dreaming part and recording my dreams and paying attention to them and thinking about them certainly is one way. But it doesn't have to be the arts necessarily either. I don't think, to exercise the imagination. I think it's certainly reading is essential, and reading in really broad areas. You don't, and in fact, I think if you're accustomed to reading just in one category, it's really useful, especially as you get older, to push yourself into reading things that you may never have thought would interest you, and then they stimulate you and your imagination in wonderful ways. So, and I think any hands-on activity too. I learned how to crochet and knit when I was a young woman, and I loved doing that. And it has a real, I think, transporting quality. Things that we do with our hands, cooking certainly, too. And so I think there are multiple ways to access and to keep the imagination alive and lively. Just look around you, and nature, oh my God, how if you can spend some time frequently in nature, I think that's a tremendous stimulant too. We just spent a few days up in Arcata, California, place I'd never visited, and the place that we stayed in had this living room view out over the sequoia forest up there, and it was just astonishing. I mean, we couldn't take our eyes off of those trees whenever we were in that house. They're so glorious. So there's so much in life to keep us lively and to keep us alive, and I think it's important to be open to as much of that as possible. And certainly, being part of different groups, which there's so many things that we can access through different kinds of groups that we can affiliate ourselves with, meeting new people, learning about their histories. I teach memoir at the Fromm Institute at the University of San Francisco. And what a privilege that is for me and for them to have access to these drafts that they write of different parts of their lives. They're just fascinated with hearing each other's stories, and I'm, blown away by them. So much, there just isn't enough time, unfortunately, to do all the things that we could be doing to keep ourselves in life.
No, that is absolutely true. Everywhere I look, there's something I want to be doing. And yet there's not time to do that. As you were speaking about Doris, one of the things I was thinking about several years ago, a friend of mine told me about the Cloud Appreciation Society. And I joined it. And every day they send you a picture of somebody who's seen interesting clouds. Well, I go to Kauai every year. And when I'm there, I watch every night the sunset. I watch the clouds. And I realized I don't do that when I'm home. The sun sets every night.
Yes.
You can't always see it, but I don't have to wait till I'm in Hawaii to look at the sunset. And so being part of this Cloud Appreciation Society has made me very aware of clouds. And I've always had a really vivid imagination. So I always see things in these clouds.
Yes, yes.
And I think that's a wonderful way to play with your imagination.
Absolutely.
And they're there, they're almost every day. There's some clouds up there to look at.
Yes, they are. Yes, that's great. Yeah.
So Lily, what's next? What is next for you?
Well, I actually have written another book that's seeking a publisher. It's called The Sinners Club, and it's a novella in linked short stories. And I actually did, when I was a young woman, I worked at a couple of different churches in Marin County, and so it's based on some of my experiences, my observations from working in those churches. It's a funny book on some level too, but also serious. So that's out looking for a publisher right now. And I'm also working on another memoir. And this one will be more directly memoir. And I'm will be calling on some of the things that I'm discovering in these early journals that I kept. And so I'm in the process of, developing that. And I teach, still at the Film Institute. I teach memoir, and I love it. So lots to do, not enough time.
Well, I think that sounds fun. I'm going to watch for that new book because it sounds like it's probably parts of it are serious, but very funny. So that would be fun. Oh, Lily, this was really interesting and fun. So I could imagine people might want to get in touch with you. If they do, how can they do that?
Well, it's probably easier to visit my blog. And it's very easy if you know how to spell my name. It's just LilyIonaMacKenzie.com. And there I am.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. This has been really fun. I so appreciate you, and I love listening to you talk about your imagination and how you savor it and how you grow it and keep it watered, and you almost see your imagination as a garden. And so
lovely. Well, and Sarah, thank you for what you're doing to keep
you're welcome. Yeah, you're welcome.
older women in view. Yes.
So that's our time today. Please join us again. You can find our Prime Spark podcast on every popular outlet. Find out more about Prime Spark at www.primesparkwomen.com. Thank you so much again to my guest, Lily Iona MacKenzie. And don't forget, you can find her at lilyionamackenzie.com. I'm going to spell that. LilyIonaMackenzie.com. So thank you for being with us. Spread tolerance and love. Bye-bye. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed today's episode and would like to stay updated, you can head over to my website, primesparkwomen.com, and get my free Spark Guide, 7 questions to ignite your spark, to help you discover your own spark. See you in the next episode.